This is a really hard question because a decade is like 10 years, which means there's plenty of games that have come out. So like obviously Mass Effect 2 came out at the start of the decade, one of my favourite games of all time. Skyrim came out the year after, one of my favourite games of all time. There's been The Last of Us, there's been God of War, which I was very nearly going to say is my game of the decade because it's fantastic, I love it. It's beautiful, it's expansive, it combines all the things of side questing with main questing and keeping everything interesting the whole way through. But there's one game that does that slightly better that came out just before, which was The Witcher 3, because there's no way that that can't get Game of the Year shout out. Like everything that that game does is immaculate. Like I didn't think I would enjoy playing a built character as much as I did Geralt, because I really like open world games where you craft your own person, whereas this one I was put in the shoes of someone else and was like, hey, these shoes are quite comfortable, I'm enjoying it. And everything in it is it's just crafted so precisely, like everything means something, every side quest is purposeful, everything you go and look at or go and see has had so much thought put into it that it just makes sense, like I'm lost for words because it's the game of the decade and that's all I can say about it. It's beautiful, it's expansive, the folklore inspirations and the stuff it draws from to make a believable but exceptionally weird and wonderful world is just, it's just good. But yeah, the Polish folklore and European stuff that it draws from is fantastic. The Witcher 3 is just a great game and I haven't met anything that has quite hit fantasy highs as eloquently. I'm not eloquent, but The Witcher 3 is as eloquently as that game has. It's stuck with me so long afterwards. The expansions for it are fantastic. There's just nothing else to say about it. It's magic, it's might, there's politics, there's all sorts of strange things. There's the Bloody Baron quest, which is exceptional and one of the best quests of the decade, never mind the best game. That's very precisely one of the best moments of the decade. I just think it has everything for anyone who ever wants to touch a remote in their life. Like, go and play The Witcher 3. If you haven't, go and play it.
I'm choosing Red Dead Redemption 2. This might not come as a surprise because I talk about it all the time, but for the longest time, I thought that The Last of Us would be my favorite game of the decade because obviously I love that. We have mentioned it a couple of times in this video so far. But then Red Dead Redemption came out last year and completely blew me away. It was obviously a game I was looking forward to anyway, having enjoyed the original. But I think for me, and I've echoed this on a couple of videos before, but great art that really grabs me holistically, like really gets me involved in not only whatever I'm playing or watching at the time, but everything associated with that. For instance, the Arctic Monkeys' Tranquility Base Hotel Casino is a strange album, but it got me into the films that inspired it, and I felt like I had to devour everything that inspired it and everything that went into it. And it was the same with Red Dead Redemption 2. Not only do I think it is, a feat of game design in the way it sort of pulls you into that world, but it made me interested in the things that inspired it, in the stories it was paying homage to, in the setting, in the real world history, and I just wanted to drink it up. And that's on top of the game itself, which I think boasts some of the most fascinating characters of the entire decade. Arthur Morgan is one of my favorite video game characters ever, never mind of the past 10 years. I think that he is so well drawn in the way it sort of creates a symbiotic relationship between you and the character is amazing. And when it came to reading his journals, I normally skip through a lot of like the Terminals and Fallout or the books in the Elder Scrolls, but I was so fascinated by what Arthur had to say about the world and how that reflected who he was, and I thought that was an interesting way to build a character who was so defined by a certain idea of like masculinity and machismo, and he's not going to talk about his feelings to the rest of the gang, but he can put that into a little journal that you can then read and get an insight into it. The prose itself is so well written, and I could talk about this game forever. I think I've just talked about 5 minutes about a journal inside one game, but that is sort of emblematic of like the attention to detail in this video game, and there is genuinely not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. It haunts my dreams. I can't get away from Red Dead Redemption 2. I haven't even played it in a year, and yet I still think about it. I think about Arthur and what he's been through, and then I get other people to play it, and I'll experience it again vicariously through them. My girlfriend's just finished it. Adam Nicholas has just finished it, and I want to finish it again, Jules. I might be playing this game forever. And that'll be okay.
I mean, I think it doesn't take a genius to guess what I'm going to sit down here and say. The whole reason I am here, the whole reason I came here today was to preach Dark Souls. Of course it's Dark Souls, come on. I want to give a very...
It's going to be Overcooked.
You thought it was going to be Overcooked?
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, I like Overcooked, but come on, the game in the decade is Dark Souls. Very quick shout out to the game of previous decade, because of course I was having a wee think, and Breath of the Wild did cross my mind, and then it made me realise the game of the previous decade was absolutely Ocarina of Time. I know that is not what this chatty is about, but I just wanted to get that in there. But yeah, no, Dark Souls, best game. It is a game, like Josh Brown says, that will stay with me forever. I will forever remember my first playthrough and then go back to it and I've lost track of the amount of times that I've played through that game. I was playing it just last night with one hand, in fact, killed Nito on the second try. That was brilliant. Nice. It just continues to find ways to keep me engaged and excited, and just I'm continuously discovering things in it. It is a game that has a runtime of say, depending how good you are, 40-50 hours, but then the potential to keep going back to it, it's incredible. So as far as story and world go, it's deliberately vague and it is obnoxious, but I love it. As far as combat goes, it's pretty vague and obnoxious, but I love it. That strength, that journey that you go through from being someone who is just this tiny wee noob who can't paddy for cheese, and apparently we're parrying for cheese now, to go on to be this absolute god who can beat the game with one hand, I mean, humble brag, is just incredible. And I think there's not many games that can do that. Not to mention the number of games that it has influenced, the most recent, of course, being Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which I still have yet to play. Hey, maybe that's game of the decade and we'll never know. But yeah, the influence of Dark Souls, you cannot ignore that, because so many other games went, oh hey, this is pretty good, we should make our game like this. Therefore, it's the best game of the decade.
Well, it's been, quite frankly, an absolutely phenomenal decade for games, and I'm sort of struggling as to how to sum up the last, 315 million seconds of brilliance into 2 minutes. But I'll try my absolute best. So, pretty much I got everything I could have ever dreamed of these past 10 years, in terms of games anyway, not my actual private life. I had a brand new old school point and click adventure from LucasArts visionary Ron Gilbert in the form of Thimbleweed Park. I got a new 2D Sonic game that wasn't complete arse. As unlikely as the second coming of our Lord and Saviour this Christmas, I got Shenmue freaking 3. Who can believe that? And yet none of those games is anywhere close to my game of the decade. Certainly not in terms of objective quality. I think I'm really struggling to choose between some of my mind. Sort of goes to indie standouts like Cuphead and the Lucas Pope doubleheader of Papers, Please and Return of the Obra Dinn, and also a couple of extraordinary Metroidvanias, Ori and the Blind Forest, Hollow Knight. But I think for the cream of the cream, the creamiest cream, it has to be the holy trinity of God of War, Breath of the Wild, and The Witness. So, The Witness, possibly a surprising choice. I think it's quite appropriate at this time of year. It's immaculate in its conception. It's immaculate in its design. The way it basically tells the player nothing, but teaches them to speak its language implicitly. It's a phenomenal work of art that almost defies explanation as well. I advise anyone just go out there and play it, experience it, drink it in, don't give up on it. Effectively, it's just drawing lines on little panels, but that's okay. There's so much more to it, and it's just, you come away thinking, wow, that was just unbelievable from top to bottom. One of the best games I've ever played, quite frankly, not just this decade. Superb stuff. The Witness.
This is incredibly hard to narrow down because we've had some absolutely outstanding titles across this year. In fact, I did a list on the best ranked games of the decade by Metacritic scores, which is going down very well in the comments. People are loving to argue about that, because I put Mario Galaxy 2 at the top. Well, I say I did, it was Metacritic. Anyway, moving on. For me, personally, it's XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, because that ticks all of my boxes about basically being an armchair general that refuses to admit defeat and will scum save his way to victory. But as a piece of DLC, it was absolutely fascinating. It changed how the game plays, in that you now had even more of a time pressure, because you had these big alien overlords coming down and actually saying, look, if you can't get it done well, we're going to do it for you. Added in new enemies, new horrible ways to die, and just basically was a fantastic thing of putting even more pressure on you. I felt like I was having heart palpitations for about 75 hours when I was playing it, and that's not a healthy experience, and yet being unable to pull myself away from it was probably a testament to how good I think that is. So yes, pick up XCOM 2 and also War of the Chosen for a good old time.
I'm going to go with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, one of the most pristine video games of all time, to be honest. The thing with Breath of the Wild is that it kind of made me reappreciate video games all over again, and it kind of redefines the way that open world games are done, because for the longest time, you get your big open world peppered with icons and whatever the hell else, and you kind of just get numbed by it and say, well, I'll go here, I'll go here, I'll go here, I'll check all this stuff off. Breath of the Wild inverts all that and makes the entire open world space one giant level, and just gives you the most stuff, the most fun items to play with. And like once you kind of figure out the weird contextual physics of that game, like the amount of elements they give you, like fire and water and air and electricity and everything else, you start combining them in like really weird, almost like human logic style ways. Like once you realize you can just pick up a giant leaf and sort of like attach like a few logs together and then jump on that and waft yourself across a river. It's just like things like that allow you to take in the open world in ways that literally no one else has ever done before, at least as far as I know anyway. Cutting down trees to fell so that they fall to cross a gap or whatever, or climbing a giant mountain one foothold at a time.
Death Stranding.
Death Stranding took a lot from it, to be honest, like in terms of like reappreciating an overall 3D space. I kind of have a whole thing after the end of the 90s where, video games started chasing HD and cutscenes and Hollywood-style spectacle and cinematography, and we kind of moved away from conquering 3D spaces like Tomb Raider or Mario 64 or whatever. And this was a game that just said, no, we should have never moved away from this stuff. It's fun and it's great to take in a whole game world, a level. They can be the same thing. And so, yeah, there was that. And then on top of all that, you have all the stuff with Link losing his memories and needing to remember that he's the hero of Hyrule, which metatextually is what you're doing as well, as you get better with all these different abilities and learn how to conquer the space in general. So by the time you finally go to the castle to fight Ganon, which you can do at any point, whenever you're ready, whenever you think that you're ready to save the land, you can go to the castle. And when you finally do that with all your cooked up custom potions and your best sword and like all these abilities that you've learned, and the music kicks in underneath, that epic score that has always been there in Legend of Zelda, underneath your big triumphant charge to go fight Ganon, it's the best thing on the earth, to be honest. I absolutely adore it. Nothing has nailed the highs of gaming like Breath of the Wild. And defeating Ganon in super slow motion with one final light shot to his eye, it's just the best. Nothing has beat the highs of Breath of the Wild. Nothing even really came close, to be honest. It's that.
Didn't you get married as well?
Huh? Did I use a light arrow at my wedding? No.